Today, I'm going to take you from typing like this to typing like this. Because today we're going to look at adding strong types to JavaScript. So in the previous episode, we looked at using ESLint to give little red squigglies whenever we did something wrong according to our coding style guide. Now we can do a similar thing to help us catch errors in runtime code using TypeScript. So over here, I'm in VS Code, and VS Code has built-in TypeScript language support, and we can tap into that with what's called JS docs. So we're just going to ease into that today. So here I've got some functions, and I've got this function called double, and it takes a parameter called v and multiplies it by 2. Now that's pretty handy as long as we are passing a number, but the code doesn't know what that is. So it can really be any type, and we can improve that by actually adding a comment here and saying the parameter is a type of number. And this syntax here is called JS docs. So now VS Code knows that this is a number, and if I hover over it, we see that it's a type of number. And now if we try to access some of the methods on that variable, we can see all of the suggestions of the methods on the number types. Now that's really handy. And if I go down here where I'm actually calling it, I could pass in a string, and we don't see that we have any sort of error. So how can we actually get little red squigglies when we make errors? Well, there's another cool feature in VS Code where we can add a comment at the top of our file and say at ts-check. And when I add that, we see all of a sudden there's this little red squiggly where I have that string of 4, and that's using TypeScript to do some static analysis and determine, hey, you passed an argument of type string, to a function that was expecting a type of number. So it's a really handy way to add some sort of help to our code, some IntelliSense, so that our code editor can help us catch those errors. And this goes beyond just parameter definitions. We can actually give types to variables as well. Type of, and let's say this is a string, right? So now we're getting another error because we're seeing that this variable should be a type of string, but this function actually returns a number. So there's, you see how we see here, there's this function that accepts a number and returns a number. So now VS Code is yelling at us because once again, we have an error here. So if we say that we want to return the type of number dot to string, suddenly we know that we're getting a string back, and we actually don't need this declaration here because we know that that's a string because this is returning a string. Awesome. Now this is handy for type checking within a single file, but in many cases we want to probably enable this for every file without having to add this comment here. So we can do that by adding a tsconfig.json file to the root of our project, and I have one of those. And this is going to be the configuration file for TypeScript if you have TypeScript running in your project. In this case, I don't, but I want to run it on the files in my project. So I can go up here to this rule called check.js, and I can set that to true. And by setting that to true, we can see once again that if I do something wrong, like pass in a string here, I get those little red squigglies, and it's just great to have that little bit of extra help as you code, because that's what robots are good for, by the way. So this was just a little introduction. There's a lot of ways that we can take this further. There's more complex types that we can look into. We can look into using actual TypeScript files. And you can also add the TypeScript compiler to your project to add type checking as a CLI tool to make sure that your code would compile correctly and that you have all the type checks in place properly, so you don't have those runtime errors. This is also handy if you have a CI/CD pipeline set up so that you can run those checks while the CI/CD pipeline is going, and as long as you don't have errors, you'll push to production. But if the TypeScript checker has any errors, it will prevent those errors from being pushed to production. It's a very handy way to ensure code quality in the production environment and make sure that the PRs look good. And it also helps with any sort of refactors or migrations you have to do, because you'll see those little red squigglies throughout your project when it's not coded correctly. So I hope you found this helpful, and if you have any other questions or want to look into it further, I have an article that I can share that I'll put in the comments below. All right, thank you very much, and I'll catch you next time.